In July 1993, a humid darkness blanketed the Kmart parking lot in Savannah, Georgia. The last fluorescent lights in the supermarket flickered and went out, leaving a silence so suffocating it was breathless. In that quiet space, a single mother glanced around and realized her 8-year-old daughter, little Charity, had vanished. Just 1 minute of hesitation, and the irreversible horror had occurred. The back-loading dock door was slightly ajar, the green shopping cart still damp from the rain, its wheels leaving long streaks on the concrete floor. Outside in the lot, a white van without license plates slowly rolled away, disappearing onto the road leading to Truman Parkway. Over the police dispatch radio, the desk sergeant's voice crackled, "Missing child at Savannah Kmart. All units respond immediately." That was the beginning of an all-night search, an investigation that would haunt Georgia for 3 decades, where the truth was hidden so deeply that even time thought it had buried it. What seemed like just an ordinary disappearance quickly became a labyrinth of suspicion, lies, and overlooked evidence. A coil of rope, a purple sandal, and a tiny hair strand in the mud became the fragile thread connecting the victim to the predator. Many years later, when DNA technology entered a new era, it was those forgotten pieces of evidence that caused the door to the past to swing open. A silver-haired man living in seclusion in Waycross, a VHS tape hidden for 30 years, and a prison recording redrew the entire fateful night. This is not just a case about a little girl lured away from a store. This is the story of a community's silence, the determination of the investigators, and the long, breathless journey of justice, something that can be delayed, but never erased. Let's go back to the summer of 1993, to witness how a coil of rope, a box of evidence, and a father's promise awakened justice after more than 30 years of silence. Before diving deep into this shocking true story, let us know where you're watching from, and if you love these journeys to uncover forgotten justice, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next part. Savannah sweltered in the summer heat, the pale red neon lights of the Kmart store casting down onto the empty parking lot. Near closing time, a few last customers remained inside. Renee Parker, 45, a single mother, pushed her cart containing a few children's outfits and a box of cheap milk, with her 3 daughters trailing close behind. The oldest girl, 8-year-old Charity, seemed unusually cheerful when a silver-haired, tall and thin man struck up a conversation with her in the shoe aisle. He said he knew store employees, claimed he could help pick out cheap but durable shoes, his voice friendly with a slight southern drawl. Renee was busy selecting clothes for the 2 younger girls, and didn't notice when he bent down to say something to Charity. The overhead speakers announced, "The store will close in 15 minutes. The fluorescent lights dimmed, the metallic clatter of shopping carts echoing on the tile floor. Renee hurried to the checkout counter, pulling a few loose coins from her wallet. When she turned back, she saw only her 2 other children waiting. Charity had vanished. She scanned the aisle but saw only empty benches. A cashier said she'd seen the girl head toward the snack bar at the end of the hallway, with the silver-haired man. Renee ran there, but the eating area was closed, chairs stacked on tables, dim lights off. She called her daughter's name loudly, the echo mingling with the droning air conditioner. The automatic doors at the main exit reflected her image, and the 2 small ones standing alone. Outside, the long empty parking lot stretched out, rows of streetlights casting murky yellow glows on the hot asphalt. Renee rushed through the doors, scanning everywhere, seeing no one, hearing no engines, only insects, and wind whistling through the dry grass. She clutched her 2 little ones tightly, her hands trembling as she reached for the customer service counter phone to dial emergency. When the dispatcher answered, her voice choked. Amid sobs, her 8-year-old daughter had vanished inside the store that had just closed. 10 minutes after the emergency call, Savannah Police Department patrol car lights swept across the empty lot in front of Kmart. The first 2 officers entered through the just-locked main doors, where Renee Parker was trembling, as she explained that her 8-year-old daughter had vanished inside the store just minutes before. The other 2 children huddled by the checkout counter, eyes red and puffy. The supermarket air was still, only the droning air conditioner and emergency lights sweeping over the aisles. Renee's shopping cart was abandoned in the middle of the walkway, still containing unbagged clothes and the milk box. An employee pointed toward the shoe area, saying she'd seen a silver-haired man talking to the girl, assuming he was a relative. The police team documented the scene, photographing the intact positions. There were no signs of struggle or dropped items. The tile floor was clean, no drag marks, the parking lot showing no fresh tire tracks. Everything suggested the child had left quietly. As officers interviewed employees, the accounts were consistent. A silver-haired man in a gray shirt, about 50 years old, chatting amiably with the girl. A security guard described him as more like a kindly grandfather than a stranger. The initial report was brief, but enough to alert the investigative team that this was no simple lost child case. Police fanned out around the area, shining flashlights through rows of parked cars, calling the victim's name into the wind. The lot was barren, no responses beyond insects and distant traffic sounds. Another unit checked the backside door, the loading exit. The metal door wasn't fully locked. Small mud prints on the concrete floor, indicating someone had passed through recently. Beyond the fence, the ground was rutted with tire marks, but a recent light rain had blurred them. All evidence was noted and photographed. Lieutenant Mark Ellison arrived to take command, ordering the entire premises sealed. He demanded identification of every customer who had left the store within half an hour of the disappearance and collection of all receipts for cross-checking. Security handed over VHS tapes from the camera system, thick reels reeking of old recording machines. Ellison had them sent to headquarters for extraction. Police compiled a preliminary suspect description: male, white, about 50, silver hair, tall and thin build, wearing a gray shirt, southern accent. They issued an alert bulletin, notifying all patrol units in the area. Renee was taken to the employee break room for a detailed statement. She tried to recall every small detail. The man said he knew employees, mentioned waiting for his wife, and offered to buy shoes for her daughter. When asked about his vehicle, she only said it seemed light-colored. Her voice was weak, answers disjointed. The two young ones sat close together, occasionally asking, "Where's Sis?" making the atmosphere even heavier. An officer gently handed Renee a glass of water, but she didn't drink. Just clenched her hands, eyes fixed on the glass door reflecting the flashing blue and red lights outside. Patrol teams expanded the search along roads near the store. They combed vacant lots, neighborhoods, and even highway on-ramps leading to the suburbs. Passing vehicles were stopped for quick checks, but no one had seen anything suspicious. Another team used a scent dog following the smell from Charity's shoes left in the cart. The dog led them to the steel fence behind the loading area, then stopped, barking dryly a few times before losing the trail. The surrounding grass was wet and slippery, no notable foreign objects. As the search widened, Kmart employees gathered in the manager's office to provide information. One recalled the man wearing a shiny metal watch, faint cologne scent. This small detail was added to the description notes. Ellison surveyed the scene, headlights sweeping over reflective windows, the parking lot seeming endlessly long. All data, statements, photos were collected for review the next morning. Near the end of the night, the search force paused. Police sealed the area around Kmart, leaving 2 patrol cars on 24-hour watch. The scene report clearly stated, no signs of altercation, no unusual evidence beyond the Parker family's cart and bags. Suspected abduction. Lieutenant Ellison looked back at his notebook, marking the short line. It began with a quiet night, ended with an unexplained disappearance. It was late into the night, the area around Kmart shrouded in the cold yellow glow from streetlights. The K9 unit arrived right after the premises were fully sealed. The first scent dog picked up the smell from Charity's shirt left in the cart. It led through narrow walkways behind the loading dock, where goods were usually unloaded during the day. They shone flashlights over the oil-stained metal walls, spotting small footprints mixed with dried mud streaks. Along the fence edge, There was a spot where the ground was compressed into a narrow path, ending at a side gate left slightly ajar. The dog stopped, barking incessantly, then circled the empty lot outside, where large, deep tire tracks were imprinted in the soft soil. Mud samples were taken, tire sizes measured, noted in the scene log. The land behind Kmart opened onto a small little-traveled road. A group of officers walked along it, shining flashlights over every strip of pavement, hoping to find something discarded. They found scraps of paper and an empty plastic bag, no identifying marks. At a corner near the fence, grass was trampled down, suggesting a vehicle had stopped briefly. No one in the surrounding neighborhood heard unusual noises or loud engines. Everything happened quietly, precisely, and quickly enough that no one noticed. Inside the store, the tech team was extracting all VHS tapes from the security camera system. The old cameras had low quality, tapes thick with interference from weak magnetic fields. The screen showed flickering light bands, figures reduced to blurry shadows. They tried rewinding to the time just before closing. One frame flashed by Charity walking with a tall thin man with light-colored hair, passing through the shoe area. The face was too blurry to identify. A tech paused the frame, zoomed in on each one, but only captured body outlines and light reflections from the overhead ad sign. No license plates appeared at the exit, no data pinpointing the direction of movement. The internal report stated clearly, tape quality insufficient for identification. Patrol teams at the scene continued sweeping the route from Kmart to Truman Parkway, an area bordering warehouses and lots. They stopped at a few old dirt roads, questioned night shift workers at nearby gas stations, but no one had seen the described vehicle or man. One station had cameras, but storage tapes auto-overrode early. No data from that evening. Police called in portable floodlights, expanding the search along both sides of the road, hoping to find an item belonging to the girl. Trash bags, plastic boxes, and newspaper scraps were opened and checked one by one. Nothing matched. Renee was kept in the employee lounge, always in a state of panic. Officers took turns reassuring her, but she just repeated, "He said his wife was waiting in the lot." When a female officer asked again, she couldn't recall the direction the man had gone. Outside, a light drizzle began falling, making the search even harder. Rainwater blurred the newly discovered tire tracks behind the fence, forcing the forensics team to re-photograph them immediately for later comparison. By near dawn, the search expanded to a few nearby residential areas. Alleys, lawns and vacant lots were all checked. A few night shift workers were stopped and questioned, but no one remembered anything unusual. Police car lights moved constantly, illuminating patches of wet black earth. A second scent dog was released on the south side of the parking lot. It circled around then returned to the fence, barking in the same direction. All data gathered that night was compiled at the scene: back door location, tire tracks, witness statements, camera tapes. Lieutenant Ellison ordered everything documented with photos and diagrams, preparing for the morning briefing. In his notes, he wrote a short conclusion: no signs of struggle, no direct witnesses, high likelihood of being led away willingly or lured. When the search team returned to headquarters, the sky to the east was fading to gray. The Kmart lot remained sealed, tape blocking entrances and exits, headlights shining on the glass reflecting the Kmart closing sale sign like a silent warning. The night's report was sent to dispatch: high likelihood of abduction, direction of movement, undetermined, middle-aged male suspect, vehicle unknown. All agreed to mark this as a possible abduction, a likely kidnapping, but without physical evidence to confirm. Savannah sank into the thin rain and the eerie silence of a city that had just witnessed a child vanish without leaving any trace. The morning fog blanketed Savannah in a thin layer, the first rays of sunlight hitting the cordoned-off Kmart parking lot. Lieutenant Mark Ellison returned to the scene, his face weary after a long sleepless night. He instructed the crime scene technicians to rescan the entire area around the store. Now that the light was clearer, the parking lot was quiet, with only a few police officers standing guard and curious locals gathered in the distance. The search perimeter was expanded along the narrow road behind the loading dock. The K9 unit returned, tracking Charity's scent from the shirt she had left behind, leading to the side gate before stopping at the fence. Under the wet grass along the roadside, an officer discovered a torn Kmart nylon bag, caked in mud and snagged with fabric fibers. Ellison ordered photos taken, the location marked, and the item bagged and sealed. The bag was labeled Evidence 04, KMT, considered the first piece of evidence outside the store. From the fence, faint tire tracks ran toward the road, leading to the Truman Parkway route. The soft ground surface, churned by overnight rain, had blurred the impressions. The forensics team remeasured the spacing between the tracks, noting they were from light truck tires. Ellison sketched a possible route of travel while contacting traffic police to check gas stations and late-night stores in the area. He assessed that whoever took the girl must know the local terrain and the back exit from Kmart. Meanwhile, technicians continued working in the shoe department area, believed to be where Charity was last seen. Under the shelves, they found a small beige fiber snippet, possibly from rope or carpet, no bloodstains or clear fingerprints. Everything was bagged separately for long-term storage. The technician noted that current technology made it difficult to extract DNA from the fiber, but recommended preservation for future testing. Ellison jotted a brief note in his notebook. Keep it, could be important later. The investigative team expanded the search to the neighboring residential area. Officers knocked on doors, asking if anyone had heard engines or screams the previous night. An elderly man recalled hearing a vehicle stop briefly, then drive off, but couldn't pinpoint the direction. The statement was recorded and filed under unverified. Many small roads nearby lacked cameras, leaving all hypotheses based on gut feelings and speculation. As the sun rose higher, the media began arriving. Ellison ordered additional barriers erected, prohibiting filming of the scene. He only said briefly, "Police are investigating a serious missing person case." Inside, the team held a quick briefing, compiling overnight facts. Witnesses saw a silver-haired man, the side door unlocked, fresh tire tracks, a torn nylon bag outside the fence. It all aligned, indicating this wasn't a child wandering off, but a deliberate abduction. By mid-morning, the lab sent preliminary results on the nylon bag, a common Kmart type, no fingerprints, fibers attached untraceable to origin. The mud sample on the bag matched the soil behind the fence, proving it was thrown or dropped during transport. The report was sparse on details but helped solidify the theory that the victim was taken out through the loading gate. Ellison ordered a list compiled of all employees, contractors and maintenance crews who had worked at the store in the past 3 months. Another team was assigned to review local criminal records, focusing on those arrested for harassment or child abuse. He requested access to logs of trucks entering the loading area over the past week, but Kmart's management kept manual records with no electronic data. By noon, temperatures climbed, the empty parking lot reflecting harsh sunlight. The K9 unit was given a break after hours without new leads. All they had at this point was one nylon bag, a few tire tracks, and an unconfirmed statement about the silver-haired man. Outside the fence, wind from afar rustled the grassy field, carrying a faint gasoline scent from the nearby highway. Ellison gazed in that direction, his intuition telling him the person who took the girl had left the city that very night. In the morning wrap-up report, he wrote clearly, "Evidence collected, torn Kmart nylon bag, unidentified fibers. Tire tracks leading to side road connecting to Truman Parkway. No direct witnesses, high likelihood of premeditated abduction." As he signed his name, the ink still wet on the paper, the light caught and highlighted 3 words. Abduction suspected, the first conclusion in the Charity Parker case file. The morning dragged on under the stifling summer sun, the air thick with asphalt fumes. As the investigative team was still packing up at the Kmart site, Lieutenant Mark Ellison's radio crackled with an urgent call from local police. Report of a suspicious object floating near the creek behind Trinity Creek Baptist Church. He immediately dispatched a unit to check it out, his gut feeling from the previous night surging back stronger. The church area was about 3 miles from Kmart, surrounded by wide lawns and old pine trees. When the patrol car arrived, the creek's surface rippled, reflecting hazy sunlight. A middle-aged man, a local out morning fishing, stood at the water's edge, pointing toward midstream. I spotted this from afar, thought it was a shopping cart, but something was caught underneath, he said. Police approached, using a pole to drag the object to shore. It was a green stroller, front wheel snagged on tree roots, the interior caked in mud. As it was pulled up, everyone noticed strands of fine blonde hair clinging to the fabric seat. An officer carefully snipped a sample into an evidence bag. Nearby, in the grass, another Kmart nylon bag fragment and a child's purple sandal, muddied, appeared. The area was immediately cordoned off, temporary barriers strung with yellow tape. Ellison arrived shortly after, his eyes locking on the stroller. It matched exactly the one Renee Parker had described, bringing that night when her daughter vanished. Savannah's forensics team reached the scene 15 minutes later. They began mapping evidence positions, photographing the entire area. Tire impressions in the damp soil stretched from a narrow trail to the creek bank, indicating a large vehicle had stopped and turned around. The tracks were deep and wide, from a truck or commercial van. Overlapping tread marks showed the vehicle had left in haste. At the edge of the clearing, skid marks and footprints intermingled, 2 distinct sizes evident, one large with thick rubber soles, and one smaller and slimmer, like women's athletic shoes. Technicians measured and cast both prints in plaster. While forensics worked, a church staffer stood by the road, hands trembling. He said the church wasn't open at night, though homeless folks occasionally slept over. None of them had vehicles or children. The area was so quiet that any movement would draw notice, but no one had heard anything the previous night. The grass marks indicated the van had stopped right against the tree line, hidden from the main road view. The rescue dive team was called in to sweep the creek bed. They brought a small boat and drag nets, wetsuits gleaming in the sun. The initial reporter sat silently by the barrier, head bowed, hands clasped tightly. As the boat reached the deepest bend, one diver called out, "Something's here." Silence fell. A torn nylon bag was hauled up first, then the small form of a child bobbing under the creek's surface. The air grew heavy. Police erected temporary screens to block distant views. At 7:12 a.m., the forensics team officially confirmed the body matched Charity Parker's description. The remains were gently lifted from the water, wrapped in a specialized body bag, and transported directly to the forensics van. Faint ligature marks circled the neck, like from thin rope. No signs of violent struggle, just light scratches on the wrists. Everyone present fell silent as the body bag was loaded, the only sound the continuous click of cameras. At the scene, Ellison stared at the overturned stroller, chipped paint revealing rusty metal framing. He knew this had escalated beyond missing. This was clearly a deliberate homicide. Evidence was quickly catalogued: stroller, nylon bag, purple sandal, hair fibers, tire tracks, footprints. Water and mud samples from the recovery site were bagged and sent for analysis. A technician pointed out a small rope coil near the tree roots, jute fiber, soaked, loosely looped, with a few light-colored hairs stuck to it. They collected the whole thing and labeled it Evidence 07. Rope. As the sun climbed, temperatures rose fast, the area thick with mud and rust smells. Ellison stepped back a few paces, surveying the scene. The peaceful creek wound behind the church grounds, distant wet grass glinting in sunlight, but amid the serene backdrop, a horrific truth had just emerged. He directed the techs to take additional soil samples, documenting the van's stopping position. No hard braking marks, meaning the driver had stopped intentionally and calmly. By early afternoon, the body was transferred to Savannah's medical examiner's office. Forensic pathologist Thomas Vickers began the autopsy. Preliminary findings indicated mechanical asphyxiation, possibly from strangulation with a soft object. Hair fiber and epithelial samples were separated for primary DNA analysis, but the era's technology was too limited. Results only reached inconclusive. No semen traces, no other fatal wounds. The body had been dumped in the water shortly after death, within under 2 hours. Ellison watched the process through the observation window, face taut. He knew they needed a perpetrator, not just answers, but everything remained hypothetical for now. He noted in the log, victim led from Kmart by motorized vehicle, killed at another location, then dumped in creek. Perpetrator possibly acted alone or with an accomplice. The final line in the interim report read, "Child abduction. Homicide confirmed." That afternoon, Ellison returned to the Trinity Creek scene one last time. The tape still fluttered, tire tracks now sharper in the sunlight. He gazed down at the still water, replaying the 2 shoe print types the techs had cast, 1 male size, 1 female. 2 people were here, he murmured, then closed his notebook. In the final entry of that day's report, he wrote, 2 shoe prints, 2 sets of footsteps. This case involves more than one person who took the girl. When the body and scene reports from Trinity Creek reached headquarters, Lieutenant Mark Ellison realized the next key would only come from the victim's mother's initial statement. He summoned Renee Parker again for more details on the man she said had spoken to Charity in Kmart. She was still exhausted, voice hoarse, hands gripping a plastic water cup tightly. When asked his name, she confirmed the man introduced himself as David, said he knew store staff and his wife would arrive soon. She added, silver hair, gray shirt, soft-soled shoes, and a very faint cologne scent, like men's soap. Every small detail was meticulously recorded. From this lead, the investigative team began screening the full Kmart employee list, maintenance contractors, electricians, and delivery drivers working around that time, plus regular customers named David in the loyalty book. In the maintenance roster, one name stood out, David A. Smithson, 56, a technician formerly with a regional AC servicing company. Records showed he was arrested in 1988 for child molestation in Florida, then released on probation. Since moving to Georgia in 1991, he frequently job-hopped, doing part-time at warehouses and small sites. As Ellison studied the old mugshot, something clicked with the Kmart staff description: silver hair, gaunt face, deep-set eyes. He lived alone in a trailer on the outskirts, just 6 miles from the scene. A police team was sent to interview him. Smithson greeted them calmly, speaking softly and politely. He denied ever being at Kmart that night, and provided an alibi on shift at Savannah Storage and Supply Warehouse, where he worked overnight maintenance. Cross-checking, the warehouse time log confirmed his name signed in from 9 p.m. to 7 a.m. the next morning. However, all records were handwritten, with no surveillance cameras or card scanners. Ellison requested to meet the warehouse manager, a reluctant middle-aged man. He described David as a short-term contract worker, often alone on nights, because reliable. When asked if he'd seen him that night, the man shook his head. "No, I left at 7 p.m., and when I returned next morning, the log already had his signature." 2 day shift workers were called in for statements. Both said they'd never encountered Smithson on nights, though he claimed to hand off work early mornings. One recounted, "I saw the warehouse door locked, but the maintenance room light on, figured he was crashing there." When pressed, they confirmed the time log was entirely self-filled by Smithson, and left on the supervisor's desk. Ellison documented it all, sensing something off. The alibi seemed too perfect, yet lacked any objective proof. No witnesses, no cameras, just his own handwriting. He sent a sample of that signature to the document analysis lab for comparison with priors. Results showed slight differences. The suspect wrote faster and more rushed than usual. Indicators suggested Smithson may have fabricated his own alibi. However, for an arrest, police needed physical evidence. Ellison had forensics compare the rope recovered at the scene to locally available materials. An officer was sent to a hardware store near Smithson's home, inquiring if he'd bought rope recently. The owner recalled a silver-haired man buying a few coils of jute for tying cargo about 2 weeks before the crime, but no receipt remained. Police requested the customer log, but the store didn't track casual buyers. The trail went cold again. In the days that followed, Ellison had the area around Smithson's home surveilled. The old wooden trailer blended into the pine woods. No close neighbors. A small pickup truck parked in the yard. Georgia plates registered to him. Nothing suspicious outside, but a damp, oily machine smell wafted from the garage. Police sought a temporary search warrant, but the court denied it for lack of probable cause. They were limited to external monitoring and public info gathering. One afternoon, as Smithson left home, a tailing officer saw him go to a grocery store, buy sundries, then return. No odd behavior. Surveillance reported, subject lives reclusively, travels solo, no regular friends or family visits. Frustration spread through the team. Ellison still believed he was involved. Circumstantial evidence piled up, witness description matched, similar priors, proximity to scene shaky alibi. But in 1993, forensic tech was too limited. DNA from fibers and rope yielded only insufficient sample. Forensics couldn't confirm or rule him out. Everything stalled at suspicion. As the case hit its 3rd month, press began questioning, why no arrests? David Smithson's name leaked, stirring buzz. He hired a lawyer, filed a harassment complaint against surveillance, claiming no involvement in the child's death. Police had to pull the watch team to avoid civil rights violations. The full file was archived under potential suspect, insufficient evidence. In a memo to superiors, Ellison wrote, Smithson is the highest probability subject. Alibi uncertain, description matches, similar criminal history. However, no physical basis for prosecution. Recommend holding suspect file and sealing evidence for analysis when suitable technology available. The case circled him but dead-ended. All physical leads faded, statements only enough for doubt. Before closing the interim file, Ellison red-marked the last page. David A. Smithson, long-term monitoring needed. Suspicious alibi, possible self-fabricated proof. Those words, then just a hunch, would become the key to reopening the entire case 3 decades later. In the months following the discovery of little Charity Parker's body, the case file thickened without any significant progress. Specimens from the rope, fabric fibers, hair and epithelial cells were all sent to the Georgia State Forensics Center, but the results returned were merely a few lines. No usable DNA could be isolated. The rope had degraded from being submerged in water, with most biological traces destroyed. In the context of 1993 technology, that was nearly the end of the forensic investigation. Lieutenant Mark Ellison still persistently reviewed the entire file, but every lead dead-ended. Police had interviewed dozens of people, Kmart employees, delivery drivers, residents around Trinity Creek Church. No one recalled seeing anything unusual, except for a light-colored car parked briefly by the creek bank. The shoe prints, tire tracks and fabric fibers didn't match any samples in the database. Police knew full well that suspect David Smithson was still lurking somewhere in the city, but without evidence to charge him, they could only quietly monitor him from afar. The lack of progress only intensified public pressure. Local media exploited the case relentlessly, reporting on it daily. The front pages of the Savannah Morning News and Coastal Journal all posed the question simultaneously, who killed Charity Parker? With no answers, suspicion shifted to the mother. Articles described Renee Parker as emotionless, unnaturally calm, even questioning her relationship with the mysterious man. Rumors spread throughout the neighborhood, with people whispering that she might know him. Renee was invited for another interrogation, this time with only Mark Ellison in the room. She was exhausted, drained after weeks of being hounded by the media. She recounted everything just as before, neither adding nor omitting anything. When she left the station, reporters crowded the gate, cameras flashing non-stop. The photo of the gaunt woman, head bowed as she stepped out of the police station, became the iconic image of the case, and a burden she would never shake off. Meanwhile, the prosecutor's office announced they would not charge Smithson due to lack of physical evidence. Their report was concise: no DNA, no witnesses, no matching physical evidence. Current circumstances do not provide a legal basis. Ellison read that memo in silence, a sense of helplessness rising. He knew the suspect was free, but the law didn't allow action based solely on intuition. The police department held several internal meetings, and ultimately decided to temporarily close the file to avoid wasting manpower. Ellison objected but had to comply. In November 1993, the case was officially transferred to unsolved case status with code C-1478, a number that replaced the name of the 8-year-old girl. That night, with the office empty, Ellison sat alone in front of the evidence box. Inside were the remnants of the case: a torn nylon bag, purple flip-flops, fabric fibers, and a dark coil of rope. He stared at it for a long time, then took a pen and wrote in his notebook, "Preserve rope for retest if future tech allows. Keep the rope for retesting if future technology permits." The short note was a commitment he made to himself. The next morning, the evidence box was sealed and stored in the police department's cold storage. Ellison signed it, stamped it, then stood before the rows of metal shelves holding hundreds of unsolved cases. Each box was an unfinished story, and now Charity Parker rested among them. Outside, the autumn wind blew cold, carrying the damp from the Savannah River. He looked at the glowing blue sign of the headquarters, with the motto "Justice Never Sleeps, Justice Never Sleeps," then smiled bitterly in silence. A few weeks later, Renee Parker left Savannah with her 2 remaining daughters, moving in with relatives in Macon. The media stopped covering it, and the public moved on to other stories. Charity's case was shelved in silence, and the code C-1478 only appeared in the police department's archive ledger, next to Mark Ellison's scrawled note. Primary suspect David A. Smithson. No charge filed. No one knew that small line would be the only thing to survive 3 decades, waiting for the day when technology was advanced enough to bring the truth back. 32 years after the night of the disappearance in Savannah, the case coded C-1478 still lay deep in the cold storage archives of the Chatham County Police Department. The old file boxes were stacked in long rows, covered in a thick layer of dust like the time that had settled over the memories. In January 2025, as part of the GBI's Cold Case Renewal Re-examination Program, hundreds of unsolved cases across Georgia were selected for review, including the Charity Parker case, the 8-year-old girl who vanished from the Kmart parking lot in 1993. The person assigned to handle this file was Detective Laura Ellison, 32 years old, from the GBI's Cold Case Investigation Unit. Few knew that Laura was the daughter of Lieutenant Mark Ellison, who had led the original investigation. Her father had passed away in 2012, but in his work journal, he left a prominent note: "Preserve rope for retest if future tech allows." When Laura held a photocopy of those words, she knew she had to do what her father hadn't finished. On her first morning in the storage room, she stepped into the cold space, fluorescent lights casting down on the old metal shelves. Each file box was coded by year. 1993 was in the last row, 3rd shelf from the bottom. As her hand brushed over the label C-1478, Parker, Charity, a chill ran through her. The seal was still intact, with Mark Ellison's faded signature in the bottom left corner. She opened the box, and the smell of damp paper and old plastic wafted out, the scent of the past. Inside was the torn nylon bag with a faded Kmart logo, a pair of purple plastic flip-flops, and a 3/8-inch jute rope coil sealed in a moisture-proof bag. All the evidence had been preserved more intact than expected. Lara took documentation photos, signed the opening log, then gently lifted the rope coil. The fibers had darkened to a deep brown, hardened by time, but the distinctive twists were still clear. This very piece of evidence had once convinced her father that he didn't act randomly. Lara created a new file, titled GBI Case Reopen Request, C1-1478, and submitted a request for DNA analysis on the rope fibers to the GBI Crime Lab in Decatur, Georgia, the state's most advanced lab, specializing in processing old evidence with next-gen DNA sequencing technology. She attached a personal note, possible male contact, original analysis inconclusive 1993, request YSTR and touch DNA sequencing. While waiting, Lara reviewed all the old reports. Her father's handwritten notes were still intact, his slanted firm handwriting, no eyewitness, 2 shoe prints male and female, possible abduction with vehicle. In another margin, he added, suspect David A. Smithson, insufficient evidence, maintain file. That name Smithson returned like a ghost. On March 17, 2025, an email from the GBI Crime Lab, Decatur, arrived in her internal inbox. Subject preliminary DNA result, case C1478. Lara opened it, her heart pounding. The report was concise, DNA extracted successfully from fiber on rope sample. Partial Y chromosome profile detected, consistent with male origin. Further STR amplification pending, a cold line, but enough to awaken the entire case. After 3 decades, they had finally found the perpetrator's DNA. She printed the report, carefully placing it next to the original file. Her father's words from over 30 years ago, preserve rope for retest if future tech allows, had now become an accurate prophecy. Lara felt as if he were still watching over every step she took. She immediately sent a second request, full STR and CODIS comparison. This meant the DNA sample would be cross-referenced against the entire national crime database. If there was a match, they could identify the killer's identity in just a few weeks. That night, alone in her office, Lara reopened the crime scene photos from Trinity Creek, the green shopping cart, the nylon bag, the purple flip-flops, the waterlogged rope fibers under the tree roots. She imagined her father in 1993, standing in the same room, holding that coil in his hands without being able to find answers. Now she was doing what he had hoped for, restoring justice for a child that time had nearly forgotten. In her GBI internal report, she wrote, after 32 years, physical evidence remains intact. Preliminary DNA analysis confirms presence of male genetic material. This case has strong potential for full identification using current CODIS database. The next day, file C1478 was officially marked in red ink, status, Aripan 2025. The cold case unit announced, Case Parker is active. Lara stood before the case board on the wall, looking at the line reopened by Detective L. Ellison. In that moment, she knew she had reconnected the thread her father had left dangling, and that thread, buried for 3 decades, was now tightening slowly around the neck of the killer that justice hadn't yet named. When the report from the GBI Crime Lab arrived at the cold case unit office, Detective Lara Ellison read the first line 3 times to make sure she wasn't mistaken. DNA profile match, subject David A. Smithson. After 32 years, the name once crossed out in her father's C1478 file, had finally returned. The DNA sample extracted from the old rope, evidence preserved in cold storage for over 3 decades, was still intact enough for reanalysis using STR and YSTR sequencing technology. The results showed a perfect match with the profile of a convicted offender in Alabama, David A. Smithson, 88 years old, with priors for sexual assault and child abduction, encoded in the CODIS system since 2010. The match-confirmed line on the report page left Lara speechless. She couldn't help but think of her father's 1993 note, "Preserve rope for retest if future tech allows." He had been right. Right after confirmation, Lara checked residency records. Smithson had lived in Savannah at the time of the crime, less than 10 miles from the Kmart. After parole, he moved through several states before returning to Georgia in 2015. He lived alone, no family, no job registration, but still received Social Security benefits. The GBI's detailed report stated concisely, "Subject currently residing in Waycross, Georgia. Status parolee." Lara called her superior and reported the results. The meeting room fell silent as she presented slides of Smithson's old mugshot next to the new DNA data. A case thought to be forgotten forever had suddenly come back to life. An order to re-examine all 1993 evidence was issued that same day. Everything from the nylon bag and purple flip-flops to the shoe print casts was pulled from storage. No one believed that forgotten rope coil still held the solution. But on the last page of the DNA report, Lara spotted an odd detail: secondary DNA profile detected, female origin, no match in CODIS. The secondary DNA on the nylon bag was identified as from an unidentified woman. The signal strength was weak but clear. A woman had touched the evidence, not the victim's mother, not a rescue worker, and it didn't match any samples in the national database. The big question immediately arose: was there more than one perpetrator in the 1993 case? Lara immediately reopened the Trinity Creek crime scene report. Next to the large male shoe print, there was a small female shoe print, once dismissed as a mix-up from medical personnel. Now that detail became crucial. She requested the old plaster casts be retrieved for 3D scanning analysis, and proposed retesting the secondary DNA on the nylon bag, using mitochondrial DNA techniques, a method that could trace maternal lineage. News of the DNA results leaked out before official release. A local newspaper ran a bold headline: "Savannah Cold Case Reopened, DNA Match After 32 Years." The community was stunned. People vaguely remembered the Kmart little girl disappearance from years ago, and now the perpetrator was identified as an 88-year-old man living a few hours' drive from the city. In the GBI office, Lara watched the news broadcast, feeling a mix of relief and heaviness. Justice had returned, but too late. She reviewed the old documents again. The 1993 witness description clearly stated, a silver-haired man, who said he was waiting for his wife. Every word suddenly took on new meaning. Wife might not have been fabricated. She began searching Georgia civil records from 1985, 1995, cross-referencing women who had lived with or been linked to Smithson. The data returned 3 names, but only one who went missing without explanation in 1994. Jolene Carter, 34 years old, cashier at the nearby Kmart branch. Lara marked it in red, noting possible female accomplice. That afternoon, she presented the findings to her superior. "We have 2 DNA samples, one from Smithson, one female. Both appeared on the nylon bag found outside the Kmart fence. High likelihood of an accomplice in the crime." The prosecutor's office agreed to reopen the file. The GBI officially issued the decision to reinvestigate case C-1478, with Lara as lead investigator. As everyone else left the office, Lara stayed behind, staring at the photo of the rope displayed on her screen. She imagined her father 30 years earlier, writing that brief note without knowing it would become the key to the future. Before shutting down, she added to the internal report, "Primary suspect David A. Smithson, DNA confirmed. Secondary trace unidentified female, investigation ongoing." The fluorescent lights reflected off the old evidence bags, sealed since 1993, and now reopened. In the quiet air of the storage room, it felt as if everything was coming back to life. The rope fibers, the purple flip-flops, and the silent vow of one police officer: "Justice, no matter how long it sleeps." must one day be awakened. After the DNA results confirmed the identity of David A. Smithson, Detective Laura Ellison set about reconstructing the entire journey of the case. Her goal was to piece together every stretch of road the suspect had traveled on the night of July 17, 1993, from the Kmart on Abercorn Street, through Truman Parkway, to Trinity Creek Baptist Church, where Little Charity's body was found. She spread out the 1993 Savannah map on the table, a yellowed paper map, its edges still marked with pencil traces from her father, Lieutenant Mark Ellison, the lead investigator on the case back then. The red dotted lines connecting the Kmart to the banks of Trinity Creek now became the primary investigative route. Based on the crime scene reports and old traffic records, Laura determined the distance between the 2 points was just under 9 miles, taking less than 20 minutes to drive at night. The direction of travel matched perfectly with the hypothesis her father had noted. Leave Kmart Truman Pinkwide turn onto Church RD. The GBI technical room restored the old crime scene images using AI processing software. As the photo of the grass lot behind the Kmart sharpened, the tire tread pattern etched deep into the soil revealed 3 parallel grooves, characteristic of the 1989 Dodge Ram van model. Laura checked the old Georgia state vehicle records and found the registration for a white Dodge van in the name of David A. Smithson, scrapped in 1995. The axle measurements and tire size matched the tire tracks in the records. To confirm, she sent the crime scene photo to an analysis specialist. The feedback report affirmed a match probability of over 97%. That was the first physical evidence directly linking Smithson to the scene. Laura thought to herself, for 30 years these tire tracks have been waiting for someone to come back and read them. Next, she investigated Smithson's employment records. The personnel file from Ogeechee Auto and Supply, a small machine shop on the outskirts of Savannah, showed he had worked as a maintenance technician in 1993. The company specialized in importing industrial materials, including 3 8-inch jute rope, the same type as the sample recovered at Trinity Creek. According to the inventory log, Smithson had permission to borrow materials for off-hours work. Laura followed the lead to meet John Miller, a former co-worker of Smithson's. He remembered clearly, he always carried a big coil of rope in his truck, saying it was for tying loads. When shown a photo of the old rope fibers, Miller recognized it immediately. It was the type the shop had imported, with that distinctive machine oil smell. The statement was recorded and added to the official file. She continued tracing the vehicle insurance records from Ogeechee. The 1993 list included a white Dodge Ram van, registered under Smithson's name, used as a tool transport vehicle. His shifts often fell on the evening detail, which aligned with the case's time frame. When comparing the routes between the shop, Kmart, and Trinity Creek, Laura discovered they all fell within a 15-minute drive radius, perfect timing to commit the crime and return. Based on the data, she reconstructed the timeline for the night of July 17, 1993, around 10:30. Smithson approaches the Parker mother and daughter in Kmart, pretending to be friendly. 10:45, 10:50. He lures Charity out through the back loading dock. After 11 o'clock, leaves Kmart in the Dodge van, driving along Truman Parkway. Around 11:10, stops near Trinity Creek Baptist Church, where there's little traffic. After that, the child is murdered, her body dumped in the creek before Smithson leaves. Every timestamp matched the initial statements and reports. But Laura still wanted to verify the connection between the rope and the suspect. She requested the lab perform a fiber structure comparison using microspectrophotometry. The results showed the composition, dye color, and twist pattern of the recovered rope matched almost exactly with the sample from Ogeechee Auto and Supply. The report concluded, material source has a 99% plus probability of originating from the same manufacturer. This was twist 4, the turning point confirming the murder weapon came from where Smithson had worked. Not only did he have access, he possessed the specific type of rope used in the crime. That transformed him from a potential suspect to the official prime suspect. When presenting the findings to the investigative team, Lara emphasized, "We have a complete chain of links: vehicle, route, murder weapon material, and DNA sample." One investigator asked, "What about the woman? What about the secondary DNA on the nylon bag?" Lara replied, "Unidentified yet, but it could be linked to Jolene Carter, the Kmart cashier who went missing in 1994. Lara began searching civil records, confirming Carter had lived just 4 miles from Smithson's house. Notably, she had also worked temp at Ogeechee Auto and Supply for the first 3 months of 1993, the same time Smithson was there. She noted possible connection, verify employment overlap. The new leads gradually formed a complete picture. Smithson had the vehicle, the materials, and a potential accomplice. His travel route matched the direction away from the scene, the rope was the same type as the machine shop samples, and the Dodge van matched the tire tracks recovered behind Kmart. The entire case began to fit together exactly as her father had sketched it. Lara and the technical team returned to the old area to reconstruct the scene. They followed the route from Kmart, Truman Parkway, Trinity Creek. Along the way, highway lights reflected through the pine forest, the road narrowing strangely. At the curve near the church where the body was found, the damp, cold air still carried the creek's moisture. Lara stood watching the still water, imagining the moment the child was brought here. Every detail fit in a chilling way. The vehicle could have stopped right at the roadside without being detected. Back at the office, Lara compiled all the facts into a summary report. Suspect vehicle 1989, Dodge Ram van, matching tire tracks. Murder weapon material, 3/8-inch jute rope, same type as Ogeechee Auto and Supply. Travel time, 20 minutes between Kmart and scene. Personnel connection, Smithson and Jolene Carter, same workplace. The conclusion stated clearly, suspect had direct access to rope identical to murder weapon. Route reconstruction confirms timeline, potential female link under review. When saving the final file, Lara sat silently in front of the map. Her father's red pencil marks were still etched there. If tech improves, retest rope. 30 years ago, he had written that as a faint hope, and now, she had turned it into reality. Smithson's journey on that lost night had finally been reconstructed, and justice, after more than 3 decades, was gradually finding its way back. After identifying the identity in 1993 journey, Detective Lara Ellison shifted to direct surveillance of David A. Smithson, now 88 years old, living alone in the small town of Waycross, Georgia. His wooden house sat at the end of a dirt road by the pine forest, run down and quiet. Neighbors said he hardly interacted with anyone, only going out each morning to get the mail and take out the trash. A woman living across the street added, "He still keeps that old white van. Sometimes he still drives it to the market himself." The statement made Lara pause. The 1989 Dodge Ram van had been the suspect vehicle in her father's file 30 years earlier. A GBI cold case unit task force was formed for covert monitoring. Lara led, with agents Carter and Ruiz taking turns observing from a pickup truck parked 2 blocks away. They installed hidden cameras at the intersection, capturing every movement. For the first 3 days, Smithson only moved around the yard, reading the paper, watering plants. On the 4th day, he drove the van away from home, faded silver paint, old license plate, exactly the 1989 model style. He stopped at a local hardware store, bought a few tools, then returned. The footage was archived, marked in red, possible murder vehicle. To obtain confirmatory evidence, Lara obtained a warrant for biological samples from household trash. One morning, the technical team collected a trash bag from in front of his house, containing a paper cup, razor blade, and bloody tissue. Everything was sealed and sent to the GBI lab. 4 days later, the results left the whole team stunned. The DNA on the tissue matched the sample taken from the 1993 crime rope exactly. Probability of error, under 1 in 1 billion. Lara read the report, her hand still trembling slightly. 32 years earlier, her father had written preserve rope for retest. Now that rope had answered. She immediately presented the file to District Attorney Rick Holden, laying out the chain of evidence, matching DNA, rope material from the same source, similar tire tracks, and images of the white van. Holden said curtly, "Enough for an arrest warrant, but seize the vehicle before he can destroy it." While the warrant was being prepared, the surveillance team kept close watch. Infrared cameras captured Smithson opening the garage at midnight. The yellow light spilling out revealed the front of a van covered with a tarp. The curved paint chip on the van's side matched the position of the rusty metal scrape in the Trinity Creek scene photo. Lara confirmed, "It's the one." A week later, she went to the town and questioned the clerk at the Waycross market. The young woman remembered clearly. He always asked for old-style rope, saying he liked the sturdy weave like back in the day. "I thought he was collecting something." The small detail further solidified the suspicions. Smithson not only kept the old vehicle, but also clung to the murder weapon itself. The 3-week surveillance report stated clearly, subject lives reclusively, travels by 1989 Dodge Ram van. No family or visitors. Biological DNA matches 1993. Sample exactly. Neighbors confirm, he's kept the van for years. By this point, Lara knew they had everything necessary. She prepared an emergency file including the DNA results, van video, witness statements, and criminal history. The arrest warrant was approved by the Waycross court the same day. That evening, in the quiet office, Lara looked back at a photo of her young father standing in front of the old Kmart, where it all began. She wrote in her duty log, 32 years later, the rope speaks. Justice returns. Early the next morning, as the first sunlight filtered through the pines, 3 GBI vehicles pulled up silently in front of the wooden house. Smithson had just opened the door to pick up the newspaper, when a firm voice rang out, "David A. Smithson, you are under arrest for first-degree kidnapping and murder." The old man turned, his cloudy eyes expressionless. He glanced briefly at the tarp-covered van in the garage, then exhaled lightly, as if he had known that what had been waiting for him for the last 3 decades had finally arrived. In the early dawn of an April morning in 2025, the GBI task force along with Waycross, Georgia police, surrounded the small wooden house on the edge of the forest belonging to David A. Smithson, the prime suspect in case C-1478. Charity Parker. The arrest warrant had been signed the night before, after DNA results confirmed an absolute match between the 1993 rope sample and the sample collected from Smithson's household trash. At 6:40 a.m., the sky still shrouded in thick fog. The front door burst open after the warning call. GBI, search warrant. Smithson, with snow-white hair and a gaunt frame, stepped out slowly, hands raised above his head, offering no resistance. The house was immediately secured. Lara Ellison was present with the forensics team, silently watching the man before her, the one her father had pursued for half his life. Inside the house was a world frozen in the past, walls covered in faded floral wallpaper, the smell of damp and cigarette smoke permeating. On the table, old newspapers from 1993 were neatly stacked, mostly articles about the Savannah missing child. But what stunned the team was an old photo of the Kmart parking lot, taken from exactly the angle of the camera that captured the night of the crime. On the back of the photo, in faded pencil handwriting, the words appeared, 10:40 p.m. She followed. In the storage room, the forensics team discovered a new coil of rope, the same type and size as the 1993 evidence, placed in a tin box wrapped in nylon. On the bedside table was an old Kmart nylon bag, discolored but with the logo intact. Inside was a pair of light purple plastic children's sandals, size 2, the style matching the pair Charity wore in the file photo. Lara stood silently, her throat tightening. Outside, the crime scene technicians examined the old white van parked behind the house. Under the new paint layer was the original ivory-colored 1989 Dodge Ram paint, matching the type sought in the original file. Forensics took paint samples and compared them on site using a spectrometer. The results displayed on the portable screen. Match confirmed. The appraiser reported, "This paint layer matches exactly the paint found at Trinity Creek in 1993. Lara clenched her fists, whispering, "Dad was right. He kept everything like trophies." In the bedroom, they found an additional small metal box containing mementos, a photo from the missing person report, a faded purple ribbon, and a short cut of rope wrapped in plastic. The specialist sealed everything and documented it. All bore Smithson's fingerprints. As he was handcuffed and led to the car, Smithson looked up at Lara, his eyes strangely calm. "Ellison's daughter, right?" he said, in a raspy voice. She didn't respond. He smiled. "He came here once. I knew he'd send someone back." At the GBI forensic lab in Decatur, the samples were analyzed within 48 hours. The final report confirmed rope fibers identical in material, fiber structure and preservative wax type to the 1993 evidence. Paint marks on the Dodge vehicle match 100% with the scrapes at Trinity Creek. Victim DNA found in the wax wrapping on the rope end. All proved irrefutably that these were the murder weapon and original crime scene items. District Attorney Rick Holden called it incontrovertible evidence. He told Lara, "This case is now airtight like a forensics file. No room left for doubt." In the final investigation report, Lara's supplemental notes read, "Suspect retained physical evidence for 32 years as trophies. Deliberate hoarding behavior characteristic of an offender obsessed with control over victims." That afternoon, Smithson was transported to the Chatham County Detention Center Federal Jail, awaiting formal interrogation. The press quickly reported, "Suspect in 1993, Kmart case arrested after 32 years. Public opinion in Georgia was shocked. Many who had believed the case forgotten forever now flooded with questions. Why had he kept everything, and for what? Before leaving the scene, Lara stood at the threshold, where the afternoon light pierced through the rotten wooden frame, illuminating the Kmart photo he had once taken. 32 years, one rope, one box of evidence, and a promise fulfilled. In her personal journal, she wrote the final line, "He kept every trophy, but the rope kept his truth." Smithson kept all the physical evidence as trophies, symbols of power and victory in the psychology of a killer, but they themselves had become the evidence locking him away forever. After completing the search warrant and seizing the evidence, Detective Lara Ellison was assigned to directly interrogate David A. Smithson. The interrogation room was small, with cold white light shining down on the metal table. The 88-year-old man sat up straight, his hands lightly cuffed, his cloudy eyes but his gaze still sharp and inscrutable. Lara opened the file, placing the photo of the rope in front of him. "Do you recognize this?" she asked. Smithson squinted at it, then smiled faintly. "Just a rope, the cheap kind anyone can buy." Lara calmly replied, "But your DNA was found on it." He shrugged. "You're mistaken. I used to work at Ogeechee Auto. There were hundreds like that. Probably someone took it by mistake." The response was so smooth it seemed rehearsed in advance. Lara recognized this type of defense, avoiding direct denial but not admitting either. She continued, opening the photo of the child's purple sandal. "And this, I've never seen it. It was in your desk drawer. I collect all sorts of things, miss. That sandal was probably left by someone. It belonged to an 8-year-old girl, missing the same day you were at Kmart." He didn't respond, just looked straight at her, the corner of his mouth twitching slightly as if holding back a smile. Lara changed tactics. She pulled out the photo from the 1993 crime scene, where the rope had been pulled from the bank of Trinity Creek. "We found your vehicle's tire tracks here," she said, lowering her voice, "and the paint transfer matches your van." Smithson glanced at it, then spoke slowly. Lots of people drive white vans. You gonna arrest the whole town? No. Just the one who kept the victim's sandals and nylon bag. A long silence stretched out. Lara could feel her own heartbeat in her chest. Smithson took a deep breath, his thin shoulders rising, then suddenly said, "Have you ever tied a reverse twist knot? The kind that holds tight without needing to pull hard?" The question made the interrogation room go still. No one but the perpetrator knew the rope in the case was tied with a reverse twist knot, a detail never publicly disclosed. Lara didn't answer, just stared at him intently. He smirked faintly. "I used to teach new hires how to secure cargo with that knot. Tied right, the rope won't slip even when wet." "Like in the waters of Trinity Creek?" Lara asked softly. Smithson tilted his head. "You know the water there is mighty cold." That seemingly meaningless statement was enough for all the investigators in the room to exchange glances. He hadn't been informed about the location or the temperature of the water where the body was found. Lara realized he was reveling in testing them, a subtle form of self-affirmation from someone confident he was above the law. She pressed on, "Do you know what color ribbon the little girl was wearing?" Smithson pursed his lips, then replied, "Purple, same as the sandals." Lara stopped taking notes, her eyes locking on his. "The color of the ribbon was never disclosed. How do you know?" He leaned his elbows on the table, tilting toward her, his voice so low it was almost a whisper. "A guy who's worked in a warehouse as long as I have, he remembers colors on sight. Purple's the easiest to stain." The response froze the air in the room. Lara didn't need anything more. What he'd just said were details only the perpetrator would know. She looked at him for a few seconds, then said softly, "Thank you, sir. We've recorded the entire thing." Smithson let out a dry laugh. "You think a few words are gonna put me in prison? There's no crime in the law, called talking out of turn." Lara stood up, gathering the file. "No, but you've just confirmed two undisclosed details, the ribbon color and the knot type. We'll let the experts analyze the statement for veracity." He fell silent, his eyes half closed as if pondering, then said quietly, "You take after your daddy a lot. Believing the truth is always enough to win. But the truth matters less than who tells it." The interrogation ended after nearly 2 hours. The entire conversation was recorded and transcribed word for word. Lara handed the file to the GBI's criminal language analysis team. The results came back 3 days later. The subject's statements contain multiple elements of indirect self-incrimination. References to undisclosed details, ribbon color, knot type indicate intrinsic knowledge of the crime scene. Likelihood of direct involvement in the crime, very high. Reading it over, Lara nodded slightly. The pieces were fitting together perfectly. DNA, physical evidence, implicit confession. No longer a suspect, Smithson was now officially the sole perpetrator in file C-1478. As she passed the holding cell, he looked up through the bars. "They say you're Ellison's daughter, right?" "Yes," she replied. "He was here 30 years ago. I always thought if anyone came back, it'd be someone with the name Ellison." Lara didn't respond, just looked at him for a long moment before turning away. On her desk, she placed her father's photo next to the note he'd once written. "Preserve rope for retest if future tech allows." Below it, she added a new line in pencil, "Rope tested. Truth confirmed." The case from 3 decades ago now had its answer. Not from a direct confession, but from the perpetrator's own arrogance in believing he still controlled the narrative. But this time his own words had become the evidence, closing the gap that time had left behind. After the interrogation, David A. Smithson was held at the Chatham County Detention Center, awaiting trial. He was placed in the section for elderly inmates, appearing calm and polite, hardly speaking to anyone. To Detective Lara Ellison, that silence was just another form of control, the habit of someone who believed he still held the upper hand. Per GBI directive, an undercover agent was planted in the facility, posing as an inmate held on fraud charges. Mission: observe, engage in conversation, and if possible, elicit statements from Smithson. The plan was executed legally under inmate wire protocol, with all conversations secretly recorded. For the first 2 days, Smithson showed no reaction. On the 3rd day, when the fellow inmate struck up a chat, he began to open up. "The paper's out there probably calling me the Savannah monster again, huh?" he smirked. The agent replied lightly, "Heard it's about that old Kmart case." Smithson paused for a few seconds, then said, "Old news. That little girl too curious for her own good." His voice was even, devoid of emotion. When the other joked, "If it was you, how'd you do it?" he replied calmly, "I used to be a mechanic. I know how to tie a knot that never slips, even when wet." Then he demonstrated with his hands the reverse S twist, 2 loops, crossing the main line, perfectly matching the knot on the rope recovered from Trinity Creek in 1993. He added quietly, "I taught apprentices that way. Rope holds tight even soaked." The agent stayed composed, feigning ignorance to let him continue. Smithson rambled vaguely, "The water in Trinity Creek was colder than I remembered. I had to hold the rope until it sank all the way." The simple statement held information only the real perpetrator would know: the water temperature, the action of holding the rope, and the victim's position. The entire 17-minute conversation was recorded and sent to the forensic audio analysis room. When compared to his voice sample from the interrogation, the results matched perfectly in pitch and breathing rhythm. The report concluded, "Voice match 100%. Speaker is David A. Smithson." Lara listened to the recording again. The raspy old voice, slow and deliberate, with drawn-out endings, identical in tone to when he spoke of the knot that doesn't slip. She realized this was Twist 7, boasting words that seemed harmless but matched every detail of the murder weapon. He'd incriminated himself through sheer smugness. The GBI's criminal language unit analyzed the recording, concluding, "Utterances contain self-aware action acknowledgments. I held it. I tied it right," proving the subject has direct experience with the crime scene. Value of indirect self-incrimination, very high. The audio was sealed in the official file as Evidence 14A, Inmate Conversation Recording. Prosecutor Rick Holden listened and said just one thing: "This case has no escape for him." A cleaned-up audio copy was edited to the crucial 45 seconds, Smithson's description of the knot, and mention of the Cold Creek water. That would be the centerpiece evidence in court. Lara read the summary report, adding to the notes section, "Audio confers, suspects knowledge of knot type and disposal site." The chain of evidence was now complete: DNA, physical items, interrogation statements, and now the self-incriminating voice in custody. That evening, Lara sat alone, headphones replaying the recording. His gravelly voice echoed, "I tied it so tight, no one could untie it." She closed her eyes, recalling her father's image in 1993, by the evidence box with the note "Preserve rope for retest." 30 years later, that rope had truly spoken, in the voice of the man who'd tied it. Outside, Savannah rain fell heavily. She looked out the window, quietly writing in the end-of-day report, "Inmate statement added to record." Justice awakened. Justice, after 3 decades, finally had a voice of its own. 3 weeks after the in-custody audio was deemed admissible, just as the case file seemed closed on the investigation phase, the GBI received an unmarked package. The parcel was wrapped in old brown paper, the label scrawled in shaky handwriting, "For Detective L. Ellison, Savannah Case 1993. Inside was a dusty VHS tape, labeled faintly, "Back Exit Cam 1993, Kmart Savannah." Lara picked it up, her heart racing. The 1993 Kmart had only 4 security cameras, and the report back then clearly stated, "Back exit area tape missing." If this was the original, it could be the final piece her father never found. She immediately sent the tape to the GBI's Digital Recovery Lab in Atlanta. The technician had to use an old VHS player, tweaking frame by frame. The black and white footage was grainy and noisy, but the timestamp in the bottom right corner was still visible. In the shot, The loading dock behind Kmart appeared under dim yellow lights, humid and shadowy. A man's silhouette entered the edge of the frame, tall, silver-haired, in a light-colored shirt. He was pulling a green shopping cart through the side door. On top of the cart, the camera caught a small shadow moving, clearly a child. When enhanced, the tech paused at frame 18. Though just a silhouette, the facial outline and build matched the description of David A. Smithson in the old file. The timestamp in the corner, 10 hours 42 minutes and 17 seconds, p.m. 10 hours 45 minutes and 3 seconds p.m. Right in the window when witnesses reported store closing and Renee Parker lost sight of her daughter. Lara stared at the screen in silence. That blurry frame was the visual proof the 1993 police never had. The digital lab immediately converted the full data to modern format. They used AI video enhancement software to boost brightness, reduce noise, and restore facial details. The results after 48 hours of processing left the team breathless. The silver-haired man pushing the cart out the back door, a little girl in a light dress inside it. As he exited the frame, he turned his head, the profile toward the camera, light illuminating the right side clearly. Even in low quality, the GBI facial recognition system identified an 89% match with Smithson's 1993 ID photo. To be thorough, Lara requested the visual forensics unit for further comparison. The report concluded, male subject in video exhibits high similarity in physique and gait to D.A. Smithson. Timestamp aligns perfectly with crime window. She sat still before the screen, watching the man with the cart fade into the night, that brief moment carrying more weight than any confession. The only remaining issue was the tape's origin. No one knew the sender, just a small note tucked in the box. Held on to it too long. Time to give justice back. Female handwriting, trembling script, no signature. Lara suspected a former Kmart employee, possibly responsible for security systems. She cross-checked the 1993 staff roster and found a name. Janet Lowell, night shift supervisor, retired in 2002, now living in Brunswick, Georgia. When the GBI contacted her, Mrs. Lowell admitted she'd kept the tape for 30 years. In a brief interview, she said, "Back then, the company ordered all tapes turned in to headquarters, but I knew this one showed a man pulling a cart out the back. The manager said don't release it, afraid it'd hurt Kmart's reputation. I was scared of losing my job, so I kept it." Her voice trembled. "I couldn't sleep easy. When I saw he was arrested, I knew I had to send it back." Mrs. Lowell's account matched the archived documents. The 1993 report listed back exit cam as temporarily inoperative. In reality, it wasn't broken, just hidden to protect the brand. This was twist 8. The lost tape wasn't missing. It had been deliberately concealed for 3 decades. Lara obtained Mrs. Lowell's permission to testify, but she only wanted anonymity. "I don't want any more involvement, just use that tape if you can." Lara thanked her, then returned to the office. The tape was sealed and recoded as evidence 15A. Kmart back exit camera tape, 1993. The prosecutor's office viewed the video 3 times in a row. When the clear image of the man with the green cart appeared, no one in the room spoke. Rick Holden concluded, "We've got visual proof, indirect confessions, DNA, physical evidence, and motive. No cracks left." A copy of the video was archived in the official file. Noted, video footage recovered after 30 years confirms suspect at scene. Timeline verified. It was the final piece, locking the entire chain of crime, from the Kmart store to the banks of Trinity Creek. That night, Lara went to her father's old office at the Savannah PD, now a cold case storage room. On the desk was still the map he'd used, red ink connecting Kmart to Trinity Creek. She placed the digitized tape beside his photo, whispering, "Dad, the case is closed." Finally, the image has come back. After 30 years, not just the rope or the voice in custody, but the last image from the night of July 17, 1993, had returned, fuzzy, shaky, but enough to prove that justice, no matter how long concealed, always finds its way back to the light. In May 2025, the case State of Georgia versus David A. Smithson was officially brought to trial at the Chatham County Superior Court. After more than 30 years, the courtroom was packed. Reporters, Savannah residents and families who had followed the case since 1993, everyone was waiting to see if justice could truly arrive late, without fading. The prosecution was represented by Rick Holden, along with the GBI Cold Case Unit team. The defense was attorney John P. Mallory, renowned for defending elderly inmates. The defendant, David A. Smithson, 88 years old, appeared in a gray prison jumpsuit, gaunt, with snow-white hair and indifferent eyes. Sitting in the prosecution's row, Detective Laura Ellison, daughter of Lieutenant Mark Ellison, who had handled the original case, clutched the file her father had written. Holden opened his opening statement. "We have 7 types of physical evidence, indirect confessions, and video footage. All point to one person, David A. Smithson." He held up the rope preserved for 32 years, next to a display board showing 100% DNA match with Smithson's biological sample. Technology has done what humans in 1993 could not: bring the truth back. Attorney Mallory immediately objected. 30 years is too long a period of time. Evidence could be contaminated, memories fade. You can't convict a man based on something that's been in a box for 3 decades. Holden replied decisively. Each piece of evidence was sealed with Lieutenant Mark Ellison's signature. The chain of custody has been continuously verified, not a single interruption. It's precisely because of that diligence that we can sit here today. The prosecution then sequentially presented the evidence: photos of the Trinity Creek crime scene, paint marks matching the 1989 Dodge Ram van body, the VHS back exit cam footage, capturing Smithson pushing a green cart out the back door at 10:42 p.m., and the prison audio recording, where he described a knot that never slips. When his raspy voice echoed through the courtroom, no one doubted anymore. The defense continued to cling to the time argument. He's a frail old man who can no longer remember what happened in 1993. This isn't justice, it's revenge for the past. But Holden fired back. Justice has no age. That 8-year-old child remains 8 forever. He took away her entire future. The prosecution closed with a comprehensive presentation: DNA, physical evidence, images, words, timeline. Each piece independent, but all piecing together into a unified picture with no gaps. Holden spoke slowly. "We are not just trying one man, but completing the unfinished promise of a generation of investigators, that justice can come late, but it will come precisely." The jury of 8 women, 4 men, left for deliberations at 2 p.m. After nearly 2 hours of discussion, they returned, faces tense but resolute. The foreman stood to read the verdict. "We, the jury of Chatham County, after considering all the evidence, find the defendant David A. Smithson guilty of the charges of kidnapping, assault, and first-degree murder." The courtroom fell silent. Smithson sat motionless, no reaction. When the judge pronounced a life sentence without parole, he merely closed his eyes, slightly bowed his head, and mumbled something no one could hear clearly. Lara looked through the glass partition and caught a glimpse of a weary smile at the corner of his mouth, as if he knew the game was over. Outside the courthouse, the first summer rain poured down on Savannah, blurring the camera lights. Rick Holden gave a brief statement to the press. Justice for Charity Parker came late, but it came. Lara stood behind him, saying nothing. She knew this was not just her victory, but a continuation of her father's, the man who had written the fateful note: "Preserve rope for retest," at the GBI office, file C-1478. Parker, Charity was updated to final status, closed, conviction achieved. Below in italics, justice delayed, but never denied. The Charity Parker case, the child forgotten amid the summer of 1993, had finally found her voice, not from the living, but from the rope that had waited over 30 years to speak the truth. Just a few weeks after the trial, the GBI coordinated with the FBI for a second search of David A. Smithson's home in Waycross. During the attic sweep, an area previously overlooked due to structural weakness, the investigation team discovered a large tin box wrapped in oilcloth. Inside was an old yellowed Georgia state map, with 4 red dots circled in marker: Food Lion Macon, 1987, Winn-Dixie Tifton, 1989, Piggly Wiggly Statesboro, 1990, Walmart, Valdosta, 1994. Near each dot were scribbled notes: 9 p.m., parking, dock light. Detective Laura Ellison, present at the scene, immediately recognized this was no random marking. The pattern of locations matched the geographic characteristics of the 1993 Kmart Savannah case, all large supermarkets, with backloading areas and highway escapes. When cross-referencing old data, the GBI discovered that in these 4 areas, there had been child or adolescent disappearances during the 1985-1995 period, most of which had never been solved. At GBI headquarters in Atlanta, an emergency meeting was convened with FBI Behavioral Analysis Unit representatives. The behavioral analysis report stated, Smithson exhibits a cyclical criminal pattern, selecting similar locations, acting after 9 p.m., traveling by private vehicle. Behavior consistent with a planned recidivist offender. Indicators suggested the Parker case was just one part in a chain of crimes spanning many years. The FBI decided to establish a federal task force, codenamed Ogeechee Series, named after the Ogeechee Auto and Supply Machine Shop, where Smithson had once worked, and may have exploited company vehicles to travel across the state. The task force's mission: review all disappearances within a 200-mile radius around Savannah, Macon and Valdosta, focusing on scenes near supermarkets or loading docks, times after 9 p.m., and traces of commercial Dodge vans. Laura was invited to serve as a consultant to the task force. As she looked at the map spread out before her with the red dots, she quietly said, "He didn't just kill one child, he hunted prey." During the meeting, she proposed cross-matching Ogeechee employee records from 1985, the 1995, with Smithson's residency history to map his travel routes. The preliminary review results were shocking. Macon 1987, 9-year-old girl missing from Food Lion parking lot, body, never found. Tifton 1989, 11-year-old sales clerk missing after night shift, only shoes left near the river. Statesboro 1990, 10-year-old missing on the way home, suspected lured away by a store acquaintance. Valdosta 1994, 12-year-old female victim disappeared near Walmart, witness saw old white van. 4 cases, 4 locations, and all matching the red dots on Smithson's map. Forensics examined the tin box, and found several black and white photos, shots of supermarket parking lots at night, low-angle views, possibly self-taken during scouting. One had handwriting on the back, Valdosta 794ths, quiet spot behind McDonald's. Partial fingerprints on the photo edge matched Smithson's sample. When interrogated at the Federal Detention Center, Smithson just smiled. "I like collecting maps. Georgia at night has so many beautiful places, especially parking lots after 10 p.m. The offhand remark was enough to convince the FBI that he had more undiscovered victims. In the GBI database, file case C-1478, Parker, Charity was updated, closed. Primary conviction achieved, related files pending under federal case Ogeechee Series. Holden's summary report noted, justice has been achieved for Parker, but the investigation continues for the other victims. Laura stood silently before the screen displaying the Georgia map, the red marks now replaced by official FBI symbols. Each symbol represented a forgotten child. She knew the Parker case was closed, but the rope that Smithson had once tied around little Charity's neck now pulled open an entire chain of federal crimes. Before leaving the office, she added to her notebook, right below her father's old line, "Preserve rope for retest," she wrote "preserve map" for future victims. Justice for Charity Parker had been served, but the journey to restore voices to the other children, the red dots without names, had only just begun. In February 2026, the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, GBI, released the comprehensive report on Case C-1478, Parker, Charity, closing one of the longest cold cases in state history. The report, over 300 pages thick, opened with a simple but weighty line: "Re-investigation time, 14 months. Evidence reanalyzed, 7 types." The 14 months encompassed the entire reopening process, from the rope's DNA analysis to the day of sentencing. In that time, the GBI Cold Case Unit team, under the leadership of Detective Laura Ellison, had restored and reconfirmed every old piece of evidence: the rope, purple flip-flops, Kmart nylon bag, paint chip, VHS tape, prison recording, and DNA file. All were retested using the most modern technology, with each sample cross-referenced against national databases. The key evidence section in the report detailed: DNA from the rope, complete match to David A. Smithson's sample, error probability, 1/1 billion. Paint chip from the 1989 Dodge van body, matching composition and oxidation level to the Trinity Creek scene sample. Nylon bag and purple flip-flops, containing victim's DNA, found in the suspect's home. 1993, back exit cam, VHS tape, confirming Smithson pulling the cart out the back door at 10:45 p.m. Prison recording evidence 14A, detailed description of the rope knot and murder method, verified by criminal linguistics analysis. Crime scene photos and supermarket marked map, reinforcing the behavioral pattern. Chain of custody for evidence, proving continuous preservation, uninterrupted from 1993 to 2025. The report concluded, all DNA results, physical evidence, and circumstantial proof confirmed David A. Smithson as the sole perpetrator in the Charity Parker case. Certainty level 100%. The final page, process summary, listed the key milestones. 1993, case opened, temporarily concluded, unsolved. 2024, reopened investigation, reanalysis of evidence. 2025, arrest, trial, life sentence without parole. 2026, official file closure, permanent archiving. In the report's foreword, the GBI director wrote, "This case proves the value of long-term evidence preservation. Thanks to Lieutenant Mark Ellison's archiving efforts in 1993, and his daughter's continuation, justice was restored after 32 years. An appendix was dedicated to Detective Laura Ellison, who completed the file her father had begun. At a small press conference, she said simply, "No case truly closes, justice just arrives late. We only help it find its way back." That day, at the GBI Central Storage Facility in Atlanta, the evidence box labeled C-1478 was returned to the shelf after final sealing. Inside, everything was neatly arranged: the rope coil, nylon bag, purple flip-flops, scene photo, and DNA report copy. On the lid, Mark Ellison's faded handwriting remained: "Preserve rope for retest if future tech allows." Right below, Laura added a new line in black ink: "Tested. Justice achieved." As the evidence box closed, early morning sunlight filtered through the storage room's glass door, reflecting off the dusty metal shelves. That light shone on the file label, case number C-1478, Parker, Charity, 1993, 2025. Savannah's quiet morning. Distant car sounds echoed, sun rays gleaming on the sparkling river. After 32 years, the case was closed, no longer a haunting memory, but a lesson in faith and perseverance. In the final report, the GBI noted concisely, "Justice never expires. Case closed." In the story Georgia 1993, cold case solved, arrest shocks community. The very specific details evoke many practical lessons for life in the United States today. The fact that the rope was sealed by Lieutenant Mark Ellison in 1993, and then re-evaluated in 2024, 2025, using STR/YSTR and cross-referenced with CODIS, demonstrates the value of disciplined evidence preservation, illustrating that justice never expires. Organizations, families, and even businesses should build serious archiving/record-keeping systems, because future technology may solve what today cannot. The Back Exit Cam, 1993, tape hidden for 30 years to maintain Kmart's reputation, reminds us of corporate ethical responsibility in America. Concealing security information not only carries legal risks, but also harms the community. Modern retail companies need transparency, policies, data handover procedures to law enforcement, and employee training for handling incidents. For parents, the detail of charity being led out the back door by a stranger, claiming to know an employee shows that child safety rules must be specific. Teach kids to only go with adults designated by the family, using a password, never leave bright crowded areas, and ask checkout staff to call parents instead of heading to side doors loading docks. For the community, the GBI-FBI coordination, legal DNA collection from household trash, and the OGC series task force emphasize the importance of reporting suspicious behavior, old white van around loading docks, strangers following kids, as well as police maintaining 24/7 tip lines. Finally, the media's initial suspicion of the mother reminds us to avoid victim blaming. Instead, support victim families, and trust the process, the continuous evidence chain of custody. Criminal linguistics analysis and 12-person jury demonstrate that justice in America works best when the community, businesses, and law enforcement collaborate transparently, persistently, and learn from the past. Thank you for following along to the end of the journey to restore justice for little Charity Parker, proof that truth may sleep, but never disappears. Please hit subscribe, and join us in the next video, where cases thought closed will continue to be brought into the light.